Hi, good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us for this morning's Job Train How Talent session, where we're going to talk about and focus on all things candidate experience. It's been a really popular session today. I think we've had about 130 people sign up, and we're also going to be live on LinkedIn as well as Crowdcast. So welcome to anybody that's watching us live on LinkedIn this morning. So much is talked about a candidate experience and a lot as well, but we and I specifically wanted to place a focus on it because unfortunately, I think so many of us are still getting the basics wrong or overlooking some of the basics, especially when we look at having a candidate experience that is joined up and consistent right the way from the perspective of a job seeker to when they become an applicant, to when they go through the assessment process, and then finally onboarding and compliance and all those things as well, and pre-hire engagement. We'll explain that a little bit more later. In fact, I'm so passionate about it. I signed up for writing a guide on candidate experience. I'd like to think it's definitive, but there's a lot of detail in there. And for those of us that are with us this morning, if you'd like a copy of that, below us here, you will see a link to download that guide. So please do, but do it after the session, because hopefully we'll have some amazing pearls of wisdom, and I'll probably suddenly start to realize there's a whole heap of gaps as we start this morning's discussion and stuff. Before we get kicked off properly, can I just check that everybody can hear me okay? And then we'll start with some intros. Just to make a comment. There we go. Thanks, Alex, very much. I had to check because this is confession time this morning. I've had my laptop for about 5 years, and about 10 minutes before the session started, I spectacularly dropped it on the floor. It's currently receiving open heart surgery behind me, but I don't think that the prognosis is good. So I had to very quickly grab our support team's laptop, set it all up and things so that you can hear and see me, or that I'm even here is a minor miracle. So thank you so much for joining me, and I'm really delighted that I could actually join you. So just to frame this a little bit before I do introductions to Claire and Sophie, one of the other reasons that candidate experience is so important is that there's so much noise out there. It's such a battle for visibility and attention. And if I can underscore this in terms of, or frame it a little bit, in terms of 1 minute on the internet. And this is something you'll see in the guide. There's actually quite a nice infographic on it in terms of the amount of noise that's out there. So these are stats from 2021. Just in 1 minute on the internet, with 9,000 LinkedIn connections made, 69 million messages sent every minute on the internet. So that's things like WhatsApp and Messenger and that kind of thing. Tinder, 2 million swipes in 1 minute. So these are pretty incredible stats. And a lot of these emails is about nearly 200 million emails sent in 1 minute. And so there is so much noise. And when we're trying to engage with people that we might want to hire, we've really got to get it right. And we've also got to stand out from the crowd in a really positive way. So that kind of frames this morning's conversation a little bit. And I'm so pleased to be joined by Sophie and Claire this morning. You'll notice that we're one person down. Josh sends his apologies, but he's got COVID. He's really not feeling very well at all. But I'm going to be more than ably assisted by Sophie and Claire this morning. So with that, welcome to you both, and thanks so much for your time.
Lovely to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Giles.
Great. So I've known both of you for a period of time. Sophie and I once worked with one another in that Sophie was with Odeon Cinemas and was a client of ours. She's worked within TA for quite a number of time and is currently working with the British Red Cross. And Claire Bush is something of a living legend in the world of recruitment marketing. And I've certainly known her and admired a lot of her work and a lot of the content, advice, insight that she's provided into the industry for a long time as well. But with that, would you both like to introduce yourselves to everybody here? And Alex, if you're there, could you possibly pop their LinkedIn profiles into the chat, so if they want to connect with Claire and Sophie, they can do. we start with you, Sophie?
Yeah, absolutely. Nice to meet everybody, or nice to be here. So yes, I'm Sophie Manifold. I'm currently working with the British Red Cross on a number of transformational projects within the people and talent space. Previous to that, I've worked with JLL as their head of talent acquisition across Europe, so leading a big team and hiring big volumes across the multiple different areas that JLL hire. Previously to that, I've been with Integral, which is an engineering hard services engineering firm across the UK. And as Giles mentioned before, I was head of talent acquisition at Odeon Cinemas as well before that. So yeah, I'm looking forward to being here and having a great discussion.
Thanks very much, Sophie. And Claire.
Oh, I can't follow Sophie, and that sounds like an absolutely epic stream. I've been around the industry a long time, as Giles just said. I am currently at Thrive. We are setting up recruitment marketing outsource operation for TA support. So basically activating employer brands and enabling TA to get back to doing what they really should and can do with a plum. I've got a background in every seat at every table in terms of the talent space. So I've been in SaaS, I've been in recruitment agencies, I've also worked in employer brand. I absolutely love and adore marketing, and I really love and adore doing that job in this space. So yeah, very excited to be here and really looking forward to the chat and learning stuff as well, Giles. So it's going to be really cool.
That'll be from Sophie.
Cool. Nice.
As we go through, please, if everybody here, we do want this to be collaborative. If you've got any questions at all, do feel free to put them in the chat, or there is actually an ask questions area as well. We will do our very best to fill those as we go through. So if there's anything you need answers to that we haven't given through this, then please do speak up. So before we get started in the main bit of talking through what are the different stages of the candidate experience, from both of you, why do you, I've kind of highlighted why I think it's important, but why do you think it's so important? Why are you passionate about it? Why are you here? Not just because I asked you. Actually, no, you both offered. So yeah, clearly it's something you really want to talk about. So yeah, why is it so important to you, and why do you think it's so important for everybody here?
Do you want to go first, Sophie?
Yeah, sure, of course. So I think candidate experience it's so all-encompassing. It touches on so many different elements and really is the core of recruitment or talent acquisition in terms of how we can find candidates, bring them in, and make sure that they settle and land within an organisation. I think it's so easy to get it wrong, whether you're overdoing it or underdoing it, or just not matching what you're looking for and what your brand is within the market. So I think it's something that is so crucial, it's so important to get right, but it's so easy to get it wrong.
Absolutely, and I kind of, on top of that, I'd almost say as well, from my perspective, it's not rocket science, but actually what we're doing is we're making so many kind of like rookie errors in that engagement and that keeping in touch relationship development. So yeah, I'm really passionate about it. Candidate experience is one of the bedrocks for me in any campaign. It's got to be thought through. It's one of the foundational building blocks for growing your business. And if you don't get it right, then you're not going to be able to kind of really celebrate or thrive from that sort of engagement and spend and time and energy and investment. So yeah, you've got to get it right.
Brilliant. So with that in mind, should we get started? I'm going to share, I'm going to sort of depart from what we normally do. I'm going to share a few slides here, but the more talking points and to sort of illustrate the journey that we're going to go on, and also, to be fair, the journey that the candidate goes through on as well. So if you just bear with me a second. Should come up in just a sec with a bit of luck. Here we go. Right, hopefully everybody can see that okay. It's not huge, but these are, and I'm very happy to be debated on this or challenged on it. But as part of the guide that we've written, I wanted to map out sort of the key phases for that, and then underneath each one of those, what does it mean, and what is the candidate thinking? So we start with awareness, and this is really the very first point that a job seeker might become aware of your organisation and your brand. And the key questions they're probably going to be asking here is, what is this company? What is this organisation? What does it stand for? Which then leads them into quite naturally the consideration areas where they would do perhaps some research into your organisation. They might look at your LinkedIn profile. They may do some Google searches. They may even touch on your career site. They may well look at Glassdoor reviews and that kind of thing too. And they want to try and work out at that point, is this somewhere that I would want to work? Is it somewhere that I can potentially see myself? Does that cover most of those areas for the first two, Claire and Sophie? Anything else you might add to those?
I think for me, the only bit that would come before that is the maybe the profile of your ideal candidate. Because we do a lot of work in marketing in terms of really understanding who our target audience is. And I think there's a real play there that actually, when you're in that sourcing mind, you know, when you're thinking about actually what's the role that we're trying to fill here, who are we actually really wanting to take this place, and what are those characteristics? And if you've got that in mind, you've done that research, then you can also be really kind of preemptive of the fact that that journey that candidate's going to come on, it'll be really relevant for them. You'll be able to really kind of breadcrumb the curiosity and the kind of questions that you're answering to make that journey and much more fulfilling.
It's a great point. And in marketing, they're quite often called building personas, aren't they, Claire? Where ultimately you try and, for want of a better phrase, get inside the head or understand what are the drivers, what are the motivators, who is that person, what do their day-to-day lives look like, what are their wants and needs, and then making sure that you're fulfilling them or providing at least the information they need in order, something that will resonate with them and bring them into the conversation or capture their interest. Sophie, anything else from you in terms of those early stages?
I think it's really interesting to look at it almost from two different points, because here is with that, particularly with awareness, it's very much focused from that candidate themselves, I suppose, in terms of thinking about what the candidate is going to be finding out and looking at and seeing there. But I suppose almost to your point, Claire, there as well, it's important to be thinking about what you as an organisation are doing and thinking about at that stage when you're engaging with people. So are you just sort of scattergun wide angle engaging with anybody that you possibly can, or are you trying to be more targeted and planned and thought about that? So I think it's really interesting to look at it from both ways, because that's what's going to allow you to be more targeted and to think and plan a bit more about it. So yes, it's about where does the candidate find out about you and what does that mean? But yes, it's also really important you think about who you're trying to target and get that message to.
Yeah, and the same thing flows through into interest quite interestingly as well. So a lot of this is a little about, it's not complicated psychology, but it's the basics in terms of trying to understand your audience you want to capture. And you know, when the candidate or the job seeker at that stage is asking questions like, you know, what makes this place different? They are going to have different wants and needs, and some of that's going to be driven by the type of person they are or the career that they're pursuing and where they place value. Some of those actually may be dependent upon the individual's makeup, or even, dare I say it, their generation, which can change quite a lot in terms of what their wants and needs are. And that's not any sort of the phrase that are banded out like Gen Z, Gen Y, etc. It can also be the place that somebody is in their career. That's going to change and influence it as well. So I guess it's Claire's point in terms of making sure that you properly consider and work out what that individual is going to need. And then you can start to make sure that you're fulfilling it. Because if you don't, then there's just going to be a vacuum, isn't there?
Yeah, and I can kind of almost see myself falling into the awareness hole, like really, really in depth. I mean, again, considering how and where that awareness is actually going to come about. What's the journey to build that awareness? Thinking about the buying behavior, and even as a consumer, I'm an avid consumer of stuff. You know, right now we've got digital messages coming at us all the time. You mentioned it as well, Giles, at the beginning, when you're thinking about all of those signals coming out to candidates, where are they coming from? And, you know, kind of thinking about 12, 13 different touch points where that awareness is going to build up over time. That story is going to be told in snapshots, tiny little micro kind of messages that you'll have out in the ether all builds into one. So, you need to consider things like your different channel strategies, your different types of content that you're going to be looking to put out there to build that story and build that awareness, kind of subconsciously and consciously at the same time. So it's a real blend of skill as someone putting out their messages to build the brand for your business.
I think it's also really interesting to think about the timing, again, a little bit like you said there, Claire, but around the almost gap between that awareness and consideration, because with some people, with some candidates, actually that can be really short. That can be something that you can move people through this process really quite quickly. But with others, you've got to spend that time up front, and you can't be starting the awareness at the point that you're advertising, key roles, because actually, you're not going to be able to move people quickly enough through that piece, because ultimately candidates are human beings. They've got lots of things going on outside of their work life or their work thoughts. So there's got to be that time, and there's got to be that acceptance of that some people will take the time to come through that journey with you.
Absolutely, yeah, for sure. And I suppose as well, it's managing that kind of engagement, being able to be really relevant and specific at every point where you recognize where that candidate is in the journey and talk to them in that nurturing way, and or kind of qualifying them in and out of the next stages as well. Always kind of that mindset needs to be always on. You need to always be kind of moving people through, for sure.
Absolutely. So in terms of today's session, we sort of outlined, what the different sort of stages are. What I'd like to do is, we've got like 45 minutes to work through this in a fairly pacey way. And what I really like us, or the three of us, to provide for everybody here is some really practical tips on how they can start to implement really positive changes that provide a consistent candidate experience. Now, obviously, I'm here, JobTrain, we're an ATS provider, passionate about recruitment technology, but you'll be surprised at how much you can implement really easily without the need for sophisticated tech or AI or any of this kind of stuff at all. A lot of it is about showing a degree of personalisation, consideration, and tech should really be there just to support and take some of the admin processes away, and actually ultimately freeing up HR and recruiters' time to start engaging with the people that they really want to hire on a more personal level. So what we'll do is we'll move through, and I'm going to sort of go through, and I've got sort of slides for each one of these stages, and perhaps if we just chat through each one in turn. And I'm hoping this is going to move on, but this is just bear with me. The wonders of technology and the wonders of breaking something at your laptop just before you go on to do a webinar as well, which isn't helpful. So
at least I got through the first question this time. Last week I was dropped off after my Wi-Fi dropped off after the first question, so I paused in a very inopportune face. Apologising for that, and hopefully getting onto the second slide.
Well, yes, we say that.
No. Pictures.
I'm liking the fills though; they're certainly really helpful. So just bear with me. This is I'm gonna use more excuses here. This is a slightly new version of our webinar platform we're using at the moment, so I'm still finding my way a little bit, but I hope you actually bring up the slide that we're looking for. If not, I might need to ask an expert. And it's still not coming up. Oh, right. Wonders of modern technology. Right. Alex, I've got to find a friend here. If this is something you can help with, then that would be really helpful in terms of perhaps give me a specific slide for each one as we go through. But we don't necessarily need to see all the detail of it. But if we go into the sort of like the first stage around awareness, in terms of there should be some accountability within an organisation in terms of who's responsible for that. Now I put is generally marketing, and actually, funny enough, employees as well can be responsible for driving awareness. We can talk around that a little bit in terms of what the employee responsibility might be. And also from an organisation, we've touched on personas, Claire, and that's certainly we're going into marketing speak and elements of psychology. That might be outside of the realms of capability or even knowledge of people in the recruitment team. How can they engage with the marketing team to get some help on that?
I think I'd probably just start a little bit further.
Okay.
That conversation. I think it's knowing and understanding the absolute value proposition of your business. So for anybody, whether you're sitting in marketing or TA, or you're sitting in, you know, a chair and doing a job for that organization, you joined because there was a purpose there that resonated with you. You joined to kind of help that business grow, deliver, and obviously take your paycheck at the end of the day. We're basic creatures, and if we just took those sort of basic kind of attributes to why you're there, then that it instantly becomes a kind of almost a roadmap for how you should think about supporting the candidate through. So then let's take the employee piece. If you're an employee in an organization and you're doing a job, wouldn't it be great if you could do that job with other people and you could collaborate and you could kind of share the load and you could go faster because there was more of you doing the same thing? So that's the kind of motivation that I always like to unhook and kind of channel into recruitment marketing strategies, because that motivation really does then help you to convey what it's like day to day to do that job in that organization, in that culture, with the people, the level of excellence that you're delivering. So all of that content can be really passionate and put to use. And that is gold dust as well. The kind of how you get all of that out of people and in is just internal engagement and relationships. And I know Sophie's probably done this more times than I've had hot dinners, but being able to kind of really bring people together to help them see the vision of what it would be like to take what they know and understand of what it's really like to work in that business, to capture that and to use it to engage new recruits. That for me is like the starting point.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Sophie, you go ahead.
I was going to say I absolutely agree, and I think it's so important at that point from a talent acquisition team point of view to be really engaging with, yes, marketing colleagues, but that wider team of where you're recruiting and who you're recruiting with, because that real sense of what it's like to work there, that real tangible evidence and collateral, etc., that can come from actual people is what can really make a big difference in terms of people engaging with your brand and wanting to hear more.
And that could and should be self-generated as well, shouldn't it? There's two bits I've got in mind. The first is a question probably for both of you. Have you both, or can you provide any advice on how best to get or basically drive what we call employee advocacy? So that is essentially using your people as your marketing function in terms of getting maximum reach. Because I think the average person's got probably an average of 400 connections on social media. So combine that with the number of employees you've got, and you've got potential huge reach in terms of your brand to create awareness or convey employer brand and things. And the second part to that is actually, have you had any experience of actually having the employee self-generated content? Because that's talked about quite a lot, but sometimes it can feel a little bit scary.
So I could kick off with the employee referral piece, and I've seen this done brilliantly, and I've also seen it done really awfully.
Right, let's hear both.
What you don't do anymore is stick a poster on the back of some loo in the back of Beyond and expect someone to go, what's that, about their business. Go, oh yeah, that's a good idea. I'll message a mate and tell them that they should come and work here, without any reference to why you're filling that role or what that role even is, or even where they can find a list of the roles. It's almost like that's done and dusted. Like, don't do that. I think what you also need to do is think about who are you engaging to leverage their networks, and at what level are you asking them to get involved? There's a real I'm a serial networker, right? Giles will know this. Like I'm pretty much at every party, every event, every kind of like conversation where TA and recruiters are. But that's because I love to connect and I love to hear people's stories. But then what I do in the background is I kind of go, oh, I'll file that and I'll file that. And then I get a call going, do you know anybody? And I instantly can kind of make those connections. But not everybody thinks like me. Not everybody is an extrovert or has a company credit card to sort of stick behind the bar. What people are motivated by is that whole what's in it for me. And I think if you can kind of almost go, right, I'm not asking you to introduce me to your brother-in-law, sister-in-law, and to get them to come and sit here and work with us from tomorrow. But what I'm asking you to do is just to make the connection. Or if it's a deeper level, like, actually, Sophie, I know you've got at least 50 people in your network, your close network, that you will have someone in this space that could do this job. I'm going to give you more detail about it. You're going to give me a short list, or you're going to say, leave that with me, and I'm going to go and find a short list for you, and then bring them in a much more introduced way. So it's not just a connection, but it's an introduction. There's some fantastic technologies out there, as you can imagine. I've worked with a couple, but the team at Real Links, for example, stand out for me as a way in which they can workshop with you and your business to find a cohort to then help you to really bolster and boost that internal referral. So you're really leveraging the connections that you have within, but you're also explaining the why and the how, and you're enabling that through LinkedIn, basically, through our LinkedIn connections. Works only when you're hiring for people that hang out on LinkedIn, should I just say. If all your friends and family, builders, they're not actually going to be on LinkedIn. And if you're wanting to bolster a crew to go and build up the next Westfield, then that's not necessarily going to be where you find them. So again, you've just got to think about, who am I hiring for? Where am I going to find them? And then figure out the best route to get that referral and that engagement on. But there's loads of other ways in which networks can actually really do that. It's just the why bit that you've got to understand and unleash.
I think it's also really interesting when you're looking at kind of social advocacy and encouraging, the organisation to do that. There's been a lot. I'm trying to get my timelines right, but probably kind of 10 years ago plus, maybe, around the kind of, you can't post things on social media, you can't do this, this is not allowed, this is, you might end up losing your job or something like that. That actually does remain and is something that people worry about. So those people that aren't close to recruiting or marketing and necessarily used to that change that has happened relatively quickly in the recruitment market are still thinking, actually, I've got to be really careful what I post on social media. Actually, they probably don't want me to post this or post some content about that. So I think there is definitely an opportunity to really be clear within your organization and to sort of come out and say, actually, this isn't what we want you to do this. We want to encourage you to feel like you can share your content and you share your things out there, because that is something that can be a bit of a legacy that gets in the way. So I think being clear on those rules, if you like, makes a big difference.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I think this highlights the importance of perhaps getting marketing on board. Not everybody has marketers within their TA team. That's probably a little bit of a luxury that perhaps some larger organisations have. Sometimes it can be a bit scary approaching marketing in case they start to put the screws on a little bit. But if you don't, then you simply can't operate, or you like to get into a lot of trouble. And I think, Sophie, what you're ultimately saying is you provide a fairly simple framework that people can understand in terms of within which to operate when it comes to sharing content via social media. And actually, something that can be pretty powerful, because it resonates so much more than a corporate video or something like that people can't really connect with in that sense. But marketing and driving the awareness, and even to a degree the consideration phases and things, or interest, are very much marketing tools. So I think here it's sort of like engage with marketing, get them on site, get them involved, get them invested in it, and then agree a framework that people can operate within in terms of generating that content and getting people engaged and interested in the organisation. To move things on a little bit, and I get quite passionate about this in terms of things like when we start to look at things like the interest elements. So somebody's learned a little bit about your organisation, or potentially they found a job on a job board or a posting via LinkedIn or something like that. What's your advice here in terms of driving engagement? I know the number one thing that's in my head is about job adverts versus job descriptions and that kind of thing. But by all means, I'm open to your guidance and expertise on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think the sorry to jump in there, Claire, but I think the content of what you put out there is really, really crucial. And I think you know, we've seen huge, long, massive job descriptions saying this, you know, still having the phrase of this isn't fully covering all of the requirements. You might be required to do extra things. It's not selling the role. It's just, this is what we're expecting from you. And I think it's about getting that balance right between selling the role, but also being clear that there is an expectation of that person on the other side. So I think you can go kind of full advert, full sales, and kind of forget that actually there is a reality here, and it's, you know, there is actually a something you know, that you're expecting from at the other side. So I do think it's important to pitch it right, and to pitch it right within your organization. So saying that everything here is great, brilliant, everything's wonderful, when you know there isn't, actually is going to cause you huge problems later on down the line. So I think being really honest and clear in what you're putting out there is what is really important. I think
it needs to be a self-selection tool as much as an attraction tool.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think also as well, like, you're doing yourself a disservice as a TA, as someone who's recruiting, if you're just going to go full jazz hands and, you know, the sun never sets, it's just brilliant party time all the time, because that reality check means actually those candidates that come through will have that bad taste in their mouth, and they will not kind of be quiet about the bad experience that they've got. And I think that whole thing, you kind of have to hold that in the back of your mind. You've got to create a really authentic experience journey based on the reality of working in an organization. I mean, I've been fortunate to have lots of different jobs over the years, and the organizations and the cultures that really have scaled, grown, continue to really thrive are those that are totally transparent about the warts and all kind of situation. So yeah, we work really hard, but we also hang out on a Friday afternoon or a Thursday night together. And then, you know, Friday just becomes a really nice open into the weekend. Or actually, we've got a very much a sort of like, you come in, you do your job, and it's the balance is actually we care more about your home life than we do about your work kind of as and when. So the flexibility piece is there. I think that statement of like what it's really like has got to be in it from the get-go. And then I also think the sort of the platform that you give your employees to be able to explain how it really is has to be there. So I love your framework from the social perspective, Sophie. And God, yeah, I've worked with, I've been subjected to my own sort of brand police. I'm like, really, we didn't really set out for it to be that. But if you've got that open, kind of almost like an open source platform for people to really kind of tell you, oh, this happened to me today, it was brilliant, and I really loved it because I had this collaboration and I had this happen, and this client came back and said, this is brilliant. That's just really great content. May not even be relevant to a job that you're recruiting for right now, but it sets the scene of what it's really like culturally to be part of that team. So yeah, I'm kind of all in for the open plan awareness and being able to kind of drive content.
So transparency, consistency. I'm going to add in personalisation again, because you may be, let's say, a large care organisation. If you're recruiting for a care worker versus an FD, you're going to want to have a very different tone of the job advert. You're going to want to convey quite different values, or we talk about things like EVP or the deal, what we're going to offer, what we need from you, that kind of thing. That's going to be very, very different for those different personas. So don't lose sight of those personas when writing job adverts. They should almost probably never be generic. There may be some elements in there that you can perhaps rinse and repeat a little bit, but have, you know, consistent templates stored that you then use, and you try not to deviate from, unless of course it's a new role, but then get some input from marketing on it. And the final point I'd add is that I still don't see enough job adverts with images and video in them at all. Going back to the point, we live in a visual age, whether you are on Instagram, whether you're on YouTube, whether you're Tinder, it's all visual, and it still irks me a little bit that from a recruitment advertising perspective, we haven't moved into that. And think about how much more information can be conveyed via video than via a simple text-based ad in terms of driving engagement, getting visibility, get the candidate's attention, and really informing them, and maybe even taking them on a bit of a self-selection journey in terms of, is this organisation right for me? Is this job right for me?
I think you're absolutely right, Giles, and I think there is, though, something you've got to think about with, again, I think you mentioned it earlier on about different kind of generations and different people that are going to be engaging with different roles, and I think it's actually really important to have a bit of a suite of tools for each role to a certain extent. And one thing that I've certainly done in roles in the past is look at how much support each different role, how much support we put behind each different role, and what that might look like. So one where we know there's going to be a little bit more challenge, actually, spending the time doing that video, or sometimes really convincing that hiring manager to go in front of the camera can be the challenge. But doing that, can make a real difference. But I think it's important to have that suite of tools in terms of, yes, images and videos, and having the text, so that you can really branch across loads of different individuals.
I think for me, this kind of comes back to setting that strategy right at the beginning. So, if you're thinking ahead and going, okay, well, we've got the next 12 months in front of us, we want to scale the business by, 100 heads, 200 heads, whatever that might be, knowing enough about what the landscape looks like, you're going to need to be able to activate your brand over a raft of different channels. And if you are at that sort of point where you've just landed, you want to get as much visibility of that landscape and what the future looks like as possible. Of course, stuff happens, but it's that that sort of accelerated, being able to just jump and go. And not a lot of organisations think like that. It's almost like the reaction kind of stage. And I've spoke to so many teams and TA and brands. They're just like, we're living in the moment. We're constantly sort of chasing the tail. So I really do recommend taking that pause, kind of really setting out a stall as much as you can, even if it's just a 90-day plan, but then the tools that you're going to need, the elements and the assets that you're going to need to kind of build out that campaign. And yeah, I think campaign planning has to be part of the kind of toolkit that you really get dug into. And if you don't know how, talk to us, talk to the people that have done it before, and get an idea of what that menu needs to look like as well.
I love that. It's really helpful, and it kind of draws a nice line under almost like the first three phases that we've gone through in terms of the initial awareness and the consideration of the organisation, and then finally the interest, right? Potentially want to work for this organisation, which leads us quite nicely into applying for jobs. I know we're going to start talking about ATS and that kind of stuff. There's some of the meaty stuff now. We've got three areas to look at. There's the application, there's the selection, and then there's onboarding. So this is some of the quite meaty stuff. And there's probably a whole world of practical tips on things that we absolutely should be implementing straight away. So let's start with the application. I've got some ideas, but I'm going to throw it open to Claire and Sophie. What your main pieces of advice around the application process of that as a candidate applying for a job, be it online or by some other means?
I've just been through probably a month of making my own applications to senior marketing jobs. The one thing that I have to say to anybody that's listening, and please do listen, is please respond. Whether it's automated or not, I don't care. Respond to every application. In this day and age, there is no excuse for not even acknowledging an application that someone has made. Now, I'm kind of like a serial kind of almost new recruit. I'll go through the process. I do it for judging. I look at candidate journeys all the time. But there are some seriously big organisations out there and some seriously great brands out there that treat their candidates appallingly. And they're asking them to jump through fire, to step on glass, to kind of go and sell this to their family to come and work for you. But actually, at the point where they've done that application, it's 3 pages long, and they've put their CV in 6 different ways and 6 different times, and you've added for that as an attachment as well. And you want them to do it all on mobile, which your application process isn't set to do.
It feels like a process of attrition, doesn't it?
And it's like you don't even acknowledge their application. So anyway, that's my rant over.
I think it's a really good solid rant. So Claire, you've clearly been applying for some roles as a percentage. how many acknowledgements you got versus applications?
So the actual numbers are 50 roles, 50 roles that I applied for in 4 weeks. Out of that, I got 6 responses.
That's horrific.
And all 6 jobs I got turned down for. So the only response that I got, well, I got 6 responses in total for the 50 jobs. 3 responses to say, thank you, we've got your application, and 3 responses to say, we've considered your application and it's a no-go, but thanks anyway, we're going to keep your CV on file.
Sophie.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's. I think Claire's right, definitely. I mean, it's something I've experienced myself as well. It's very frustrating from a candidate point of view to not hear back and to not do that, and knowing what most, if not all, ATS systems enable. It can enable people to do. There isn't really an excuse for that not to be happening. But one thing I also think about the application process in itself, because there seems to be sort of 2 different paths. One that goes down the one click, you barely even know that you've applied for a role, versus the other side where you said, Claire, you've jumped through hundreds of different hoops, you filled in all of these different bespoke forms, you've uploaded your CV in every format possible, and then you know, ultimately sometimes you get the same response, sometimes you're going to get no response either way. But I think that's quite interesting, though. Some organizations will give you quite a detailed response when you've just done a one-click apply, and then others you'll get nothing or a generic response when you've actually had to put a lot of work in. And I think it's something, actually from an experience point of view, I think there should be some matching from both sides. I'm not saying that there needs to be the exact same amount of time and effort put in from both sides. I think there's definitely a positive and negative to go down each route in terms of going, let's get everybody to apply quickly, one click apply versus getting more detail. But if you're asking people and asking candidates to put in that effort, you're going to have to put in a bit more effort in return to honour that, I think. And that's something that I think gives a different feel to that experience. I don't mind spending the time doing an application, putting the time in, if you're going to spend the time reading it and then feeding back to me.
I think it devalues the recruiter massively from the effort that they put in terms of, this is the role, this is all the work that we go into, advertising it, really getting it out there, talking about the story, supporting that story with all of the employer brand assets and everything else. There's a ton of money, resource, investment, everything going into that. And then suddenly someone's gone and spent 20 minutes trying to put their application in, and then you do nothing. Like, totally undervalues the time and energy that the TA team have actually put into this in the first place.
You're so right, and it's not complicated. I think in any case, whether there's a huge debate around one click and that kind of thing. Funny enough, we were discussing it just yesterday, and we support like direct applies via Indeed and Reed and Total Jobs and things, and absolutely they serve a purpose. But from an application form perspective, I think you really got to keep it under a few minutes and no more than that. To your point, Claire, about there are going to be people who are going to be applying via mobile, for example. They're not necessarily going to have the most consistent mobile reception wherever they might be. You just keep it really simple for them, and then just ask for enough information in order for the recruiter to make an initial assessment on them. Then go back and ask them for references and education and qualifications and all that kind of stuff, because you don't need to know that stuff up front. So keep it relevant. But once do acknowledge the application. But I think there is your opportunity. If it's a one-click apply, then you can actually then direct the candidate with the acknowledgement back to the career site or back to the job advert, so they can spend some more time reading and digesting it before you then respond to them. And I would say, apart from the acknowledgement, but just tell them what's next. Give them a timeline, set some clear expectations. We will respond to you, or we'll let you know we've been successful or not within X time. The next stage, if you are successful, then there'll be an interview, and just give them an idea about the process itself. And again, this isn't complicated. This can all be done within any ATS.
And also, well, it's not like it's just new. Like, this has been around. I mean, so I kind of say I've been around for about 20 years. But this stuff, when I first came into the recruitment space in an agency environment, technology existed in exactly this. I spent 5 years at Broadbean. I know their traffic light application. So you can almost have an automatic filter now, kind of enabling that real easy auto response that still can be personalized, because you can drop in a couple of little fields. It's really not difficult. But if that isn't enabled, then quite frankly, I'm not going to work with you, because you don't take your recruitment seriously. You don't take people seriously.
And I think,
yeah, go on, Sophie.
So I was going to say, I think it goes back to that planning at the start as well, that you were talking about, Claire, and really planning out your campaign, and so that's sort of role by role, but also generally across what you're trying to do, because you've got to think about interview times or plans, or kind of what that process is going to look like before you get anywhere near those stages, because you need to have an idea of, are you going to be struggling to get time in people's diaries, which is really basic things, but makes a big difference. I've got an example of where I was going through a process myself personally, and I had a very quick two-stage interview process, which was moving very, very quickly, and then the entire hiring team went on holiday for nearly 3 weeks, at which point they came back. Then they had to rethink and decide what they were doing, and then put the role on hold a month later. So it as a candidate experience point of view, to start with, it was great. This was really exciting, but actually they all knew up front what was happening. And I think there's an opportunity to go, let's think about this. Let's think about what we're doing, bringing people into a process, people putting their time into it, because actually it does leave a different taste around the brand at the end of it. And you may want them for a future role in a different place, or different part of the organization. So by just not planning ahead, by not thinking about that timeline, things happen, of course they do, but communicate that. I think that's really, really important. But that planning impacts every stage of the journey.
Yeah. And I think it's also, as well, like to your point, Sophie, it's not just about those people that are in that application stage. It's the consideration of people throughout the entire process. From the awareness, tell them what's happening next, where they can get more information, tell them who they can talk to get a real clear picture of what it's like in that organization, show them what the application process looks like ahead of time, so that if they choose to step forward and put themselves forward, which, let's face it, we work in the business, right? So we know and understand, warts and all, just how awful and how brilliant it can be, and it's a two-edged sword. But people don't willy-nilly apply for new jobs, right? This is a big, major consideration for someone's life.
Absolutely. It's one of the biggest decisions that you will make next to, buying a house.
Go every day. I mean, Giles and I could probably talk about this till the cows come home, but every day we know and see people who are just really flippant with that someone's life choice, right? So, it's more about know and understand your kind of role in that influence and that whole place, but get the movement right, get it and make it and talk about it, but really, really consider that there's a person at the end of this, at the end of the day. I was just going to say, Katrina's book, Katrina Collier, she wrote Robot Proof Recruiter. And even though we are talking about recruitment supported by technology, we're talking about the fact that this is a human person at the end of all of this, right? So yeah, we can build in all of the tech to help us do all of this and do all the heavy lifting, but we have to think like a human being, talking to another human being, or at least having that influence over someone's life at the end of the day.
Yeah, and if you want to know what it feels like, I would urge everybody here, put yourself through your own experience and measure it. And the hard measure could be, how long does it take to complete the application form? Is it easy to follow? What kind of follow-up is there? Is it personalised? Does it set expectations? Does it give me links to other information I can get hold of, and that kind of thing? And that moves us into, we've got 2 areas to cover. There are only 10 minutes to go. I actually should have split this into 2 sessions because there's so much to talk about. But selection, and this is sometimes where it can all go wrong. And I say that because to a degree, as recruiters, HR, TA people, even marketing, we can, to a greater or less degree, control that candidate experience up to the point of them being interviewed by somebody other than us. And now that might be virtual interviews, it could be face-to-face interviews. There could be other assessments. We touch on assessments, but we'll leave those out. But ultimately, we're talking about interviews here, whether it's telephone or Teams-based interviews or face-to-face interviews. But this is nothing sometimes where the hiring managers get involved. So I'm kind of keen just to get right to the nitty-gritty of how can we better, I'll say, support our hiring managers in making sure that that candidate experience is consistent with everything they've done before. Because we've got everything right up till now. We've tweaked it all, we've improved it all, but this is sometimes where it can go awry.
I think quite often the only real training that hiring managers are put through is around sort of unconscious bias and that kind of thing, which is absolutely crucial training and is really, really important that it is there. But there's also an opportunity to be talking to them about how they can sell the organisation, how they can talk about the employer brand or what that looks like, how they can just hold a good interview, because you can have someone who's a great manager at the other side. They could be doing everything that they need to do, but actually the interview itself is just not wowing those candidates. It's not bringing them through. It's not wanting them to work, them not wanting to work for the organisation. And that is a skill set. Interviewing is a skill set, being able to get the most out of people, to get the best out of people and allow them to show themselves. So I think it's difficult to put more training in for hiring managers. Everybody's busy, that's the case. But I think having those resources, having that support to help a manager actually hold a good interview is really, really important.
And I think also as well, giving them a buddy, whether it's a really great brand or TA support to be there, a recruiter that literally knows and understands what the process has been up to date, has actually really engaged with the person in and amongst the sort of process, or someone who's got that real sort of specific skill in doing the job, someone that can be there in terms of being able to verify this person sounds like they know what they're doing and they could do the job, or even ahead of time as well. I've just been through a really great process with another client of mine, and it was almost like we really did want to kind of explore exactly how this person would be in a head of marketing role. And we talked about, okay, so they should be able to, at a minimum, be able to kind of design a campaign, for example. And then we got them to pitch that. And then we got them to talk to us about what it was that they went through in that process, but also how they like to work. Then we got a conversation following that, like in terms of what questions they really wanted to dig into. So it became a very open discussion, and really quite easily they were at ease, and they were kind of almost like themselves meeting with two virtual strangers. Like, so within an hour, everything, given that time is obviously a massively short commodity for most organizations. You want to kind of get through the process as quickly as possible, get the person in the chair, get them being as productive as quickly as possible. But if you don't take the time to really sit and understand the characteristics, the traits, the skills, and also that kind of motivation to do the job in an interview, and it can all come out in an hour, then you're gonna either set yourself up for total failure, or it's going to be 2-3 months down the line where this person's in place, but they're not the right person for that job. And you've hired based on that sort of, they ticked all the boxes, but actually you didn't investigate really whether or not they were able to sort of dive into the culture and be part of it seamlessly, or you've not set them up for success on the onboarding, which I know is your final piece.
Yeah, it will be. I'm just going to ask you a quick question, if I can, Sophie. How good we are at communicating to our hiring managers as recruited business partners, all the time and investment and planning that's gone through up to that point of interview? Because I think sometimes they just see candidates that arrive for interview. They're just a number, they're just a name, they're just a CV, nothing more than that. But do they understand the journey that's been created, or the experience that's been created for that candidate, pull them in and get them engaged, and then finally, have they put themselves in the candidate's shoes before that interview?
I think that's a really good point, Giles, and I think it's not talked about enough. And I think those TA teams that are really truly embedded within an organisation and really can really help drive forward an organisation, because they're bringing in the right talent and the right people into the organisation, are those that are really embedded with that hiring manager team. Yes, they're hand in hand there with HR and HR business partners and working really closely together, but they're sharing that insight. So whether it could be some amazing tools like LinkedIn Insights, where you're sharing what the market looks like, what that, it's going to be really tough for us to find these candidates. It's going to be really, it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of effort, and that regular communication across all different levels within the organization as well. So there's your individual recruiter working with your individual hiring manager, but then you've got all the different levels within the organization talking to each other about talent and where we're going to find these people and what that looks like. Again, it goes back to that planning. It goes back to what is that strategy, what is that plan that you're looking to do. And actually, if that's not there, each individual role is going to suffer. Each individual role process is going to suffer if you haven't got that overarching kind of ethos within the organization and within the business. And that's something that can be quite daunting if you haven't got those relationships and those things in place to start with. But actually you can do that, piece by piece, and start to build that up by thinking about how you start to share more of the great insight that the recruiting team have, or that you have within the organization. Sharing some of that data, sharing some of those stats, you can really start to kind of bring some of that out there, and help the business understand. It's not something you're going to switch on overnight.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes it's helping the hiring manager to understand the consequences of not getting it right as well. And that is ultimately they're going to have an empty chair. And it's difficult to measure sometimes, but I think perhaps something we haven't touched on, there's been so much to get through today, is about giving feedback post-assessment, but also getting feedback as well at each stage. We can go through and we can have a look at what the awareness interest application phase looks like, and we can make a judgment or assessment on how we found it. But ask candidates, and especially post-interview as well, give and get feedback. It's a simple exchange. The candidate will really, really appreciate the feedback that they receive in exchange for the investment that they've made in the process, even if they haven't been successful. But maybe we should move on to very quickly talking about the successful ones. So the onboarding phase is sometimes is seen as a form-filling exercise, a compliance exercise, and things. And one of the things I cover in the guidance, sometimes we talk about a job training, is almost like the 4 C's of onboarding. So there's 4 of them, not just one of them. So compliance isn't one. You've got context, communication, and culture. And these 3 bits are sometimes overlooked. I think we can have a whole separate session, and perhaps we will have, about onboarding and things. But the compliance bits need to be done. Offer letters need to be sent out, contracts need to be reviewed and accepted. It can be all done online. It can be done online beautifully within Job Train. You can do virtual right to work checks, keep some pace behind it, but almost want to think about what goes after that, because sometimes, a bit like a black hole, you sign your contract, you hand in your notice, and you don't hear another thing sometimes. So it's a question of how do we convey, or how do we keep the communication consistent? How can we connect with those people before they join, and obviously convey culture, even provide a little bit of context about what's going to happen ahead of their first day. So Claire and Sophie, over to you in terms of how best do we engage with people? How do we prevent that black hole?
I think I have to defer this to Sophie, because actually I'm in a really fortunate place where, even though we've not had EA or HR in some places, there's always been a business partner that's basically taken care of all of that. For me, especially running teams and kind of hiring for my own team.
Well, I think what's most important is to be clear on who's responsible for what when you're going through an onboarding process. Yep. And that is ultimately the key to whatever it is you're trying to achieve, is just being clear on who or what team is responsible for what. Almost like we were talking about the first stage, where is it marketing, is it employees, is it TA, is it HR? That's the same with onboarding, and it's almost like that's why a lot of things go wrong at either end of those things, is because actually, oh, well, I thought you were doing it, or, actually, are you covering this? Or, you might have an L&D team that are covering the learning things on day one, and then you've got the TA team that have handed over to an HR team to issue a contract. So actually that feeling from a candidate point of view can suddenly become really disjointed, really confusing, and not a great experience, because it's usually that process has been built from our side, from what are we wanting to do, how does it work best within our systems. And actually something that I've done in a previous role is looking at is basically doing a user experience of that end-to-end process, which was fascinating and scary to go through, but really trying to build that process from a candidate's point of view. So that successful candidate, what does that need to look like, and then we build our process to make that happen. And actually that makes it a much smoother and a much easier process. Again, there's all sorts of technology out there that links into your IT systems to get your laptop set up on day one, that links into HR systems to get them set up with all of those kind of things. That's all possible to do. But it's also, because it's all possible to do, you can end up with a bit of a monster at the other end in terms of all of these systems plugged into each other. So I think thinking about what does that end of system or end of process look and feel like for the candidate, and who's going to do what.
Yeah, I mean, okay, we have some great tech. We've got Cool Welcome Hub, and it covers all of these different elements, and you can have video content and all the rest of it. It's super cool. But something as simple as agreeing as part of what that onboarding process, what does that look like and who's responsible for what? The hiring manager sending a simple WhatsApp with a video on it, or even just a simple WhatsApp, something to keep that communication going, perhaps assigning a buddy or a bit of a mentor at the start of that process. As soon as the contract signed, they can keep in touch and just be on hand to answer any questions and what have you, because you've already made the point, Claire, about, well, once we've hired these people, we want them to feel settled, because when they're settled, they'll start performing and added value to our organization far more quickly than when they go in completely green and not sure, where to go, who to speak with, where do I fit in, what to expect, and that kind of thing.
It's really imperative as well. Like, more and more, we've got organizations that have got hybrid setups or combinations of premise and remote. And, even if you are 100% remote, you still need to onboard that new member of the team and get them to kind of connect with the wider team as well. And kind of, I think, there's just so much thought that goes into it. I think and again, Sophie mentioned, we could probably spend you mentioned too, Giles, spend a whole section just really unplugging what are all the experience touch points of onboarding and where does it end. And actually, even some organizations that I've been working with, it doesn't end on day one, it doesn't even end on day 90. That first 18 months to 2 years is a constant kind of recalibration of what did we do great, what did we didn't do, have we taken you through your first 90 days in a really constructive manner, have you felt engagement, have you felt part of the team, how has that experience kind of enabled you to then go on and refer other people in, and then how have we treated you as an employee post 12 months. Let's have
another session. Let's do another session. If you're up for it, I absolutely am, because it's a big area, and we know that even post offer, if I've signed up with different job boards or different agencies, they're going to keep getting approaches. If I'm sat there with a dearth or a black hole of information, and I'm perhaps feeling a little bit unsettled because I'm not sure what's happening next, I'm going to listen to those people. I may even accept those offers. You think about the sheer amount of time and investment in everything we've talked about around candidate experience, and all the time and effort and money that's been ploughed into it, only to lose somebody because we haven't communicated with them, we haven't felt wanted and needed or part of the organization before they've joined. What a stage to drop the ball.
It's a great opportunity in those first sort of, say, 90 days plus to get those referrals, as you sort of mentioned there a little bit, Claire, from people they know, that from people from their network, to get them in the organization and to be talking about things. If you get it right, you're going to get some great, hopefully, content that they're going to create out of that, because they're having a great experience. I've seen some wonderful posts on LinkedIn of people starting new jobs and that experience and what it's been like, that really does make you think, I would actually want to go and work there. I'd like to go and do that. So it's definitely an opportunity to help with your that awareness piece for future roles as well.
Yeah, I think more and more what's becoming really important to organizations is to realize that employer brand needs to be always on, and you need to have that employee engagement, kind of almost 365 days a year for every person in your organization. and there's certain touch points and certain content opportunities, and the messaging can all resonate from that engagement. You've just got to always have it circulating, always have it on. You'll be able to then always have content to go out, and you'll scale and grow your team really beautifully if you can plug into that, what I call the mainframe of your brand. And it's how you scale a commercial organization just as much as you would your people organization.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. I mean, we've already gone over, but it's been such a great chat, and thank you both so much. Have you any final thoughts that you want to share before we wrap up today's session?
I'm now thinking that actually I never can actually just say everything that I need to say in an hour. So thank you for having us on, Giles, and also just accepting the waffle.
I think it's been a great conversation, and I think it's proven there is just so much, and there's so many opportunities throughout that candidate journey. There's so many things that you can do, that actually just doing one of those things is great and is a great step forward. And nobody's candidate journey is perfect. We're all aiming for that perfect, definitely, but just keep doing those little things, and that's what will make a big difference overall.
Yeah, definitely the incremental change, and not trying to rush at it all. And like you say, Sophie, get it right from day one. You're probably not, but keep asking the questions, find out where you can evolve. Yeah. And that's the most important thing. And obviously having a decent platform at the heart of your business.
Well, absolutely. I'm preferably job trained. That goes without saying. I've got 3 takeaways, and it's pretty simple. Rather than 4 C's of onboarding, we'll talk about 3 C's of candidate experience, and that is really using consideration and showing consideration throughout the process, keeping communication throughout the process, and also being consistent through the process. Those are the 3 C's, and plus download our guide. So apart from the persona bit, which I hadn't considered, Claire, and please be fair, it's way beyond my pay grade anyway. I hope the guide will be really helpful to you. I cannot thank you, Sophie and Claire, enough for your time this morning. I wish we'd set aside a whole morning for it. We could have gabbled on, and we had a great time, but I've really, really enjoyed it. So thank you, and thank you everybody for joining us this morning. We hope you've got really good value from it, and I'll look forward to seeing you all again next month. Thank you, and hope you have a super day. Thanks, Claire. Thanks, Sophie.
Thanks, Ben.